Have you ever entered a space and sensed a subtle tension you couldn't name? Many people believe they are in command, while in reality, their intentions are as clear as day. The Stoics taught that to navigate the world silently, with wisdom and well ahead of everyone else. If you're prepared to perceive what most overlook, then continue watching. The knowledge that follows could transform how you exist in the world. 1. Detach from your emotion. See with true clarity. There's a specific form of unawareness most people have that escapes any standard diagnosis. It doesn't impair your ability to see faces or hear conversations, but it causes you to miss the underlying truth. It veils true motives, twists the surrounding energy, and conceals what should be plain to see. And that filter is deceptive. Today's world conditions us for immediate, loud, and reflexive responses. You enter a room and your first thought is, what did they think of me? Rather than, what is the dynamic in this space? You start to speak and worry. Did I come across as confident? Instead of considering, what was the meaning of that quiet moment? This way of life is chaotic, hurried, draining, and ultimately, it keeps you blind. Stoicism presents an alternative path. As the Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius penned, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment. That very sentence holds a potential remedy for this emotional blindness. The instant you prevent your feelings from dictating the meaning of an event, you begin to see that event for what it is. This is the initial move toward outsmarting anyone without their knowledge. Clear away the fog, and your mind can become a mirror. Pristine. He was on edge, a knot in his stomach, his pulse quickening. He felt out of place, weighed down by that feeling. He sat in silence, spoke with hesitation, and saw every neutral look from others as a confirmation of his inadequacy. Leaving the meeting, he thought, they must think I'm not up to the task. But here is what he failed to notice. A senior manager had actually smiled encouragingly while he spoke. Another had highlighted one of his points on a document. Thought he overlooked all of this, not due to a lack of intelligence. They don't critique their own performance as it happens. They observe. They regulate their breathing. They notice how individuals react not only to them, but also to one another. They observe the flow of interaction, who consistently speaks over others, who struggles to maintain eye contact, whose demeanor shifts when a person of authority appears, who uses excessive talking to conceal their lack of confidence. Be wondering, but how do I stop myself from reacting? How can I observe and not judge? The solution is straightforward in concept, but challenging in practice. Cultivate detachment. This detachment isn't about being cold or uncaring. It's about maintaining a disciplined space between an event and your reaction to it. It involves pausing your initial emotional surge to ask, is my interpretation reality, or is it a projection of my own feelings? Your immediate thought is there. Uninterested. I'm boring them. But what if their phone just buzzed with an urgent family matter? Epictetus stated, it's not events that upset us, but our interpretation of them. And therein lies the great irony. The more you focus on yourself, the less you see of others. But when you can step outside of your own ego, your vision sharpens. You start to hear what isn't said. You perceive the subtle change in a person's voice. You see the brief pause before they give an answer. You start to grasp human nature, not through speculation, but through silent observation. And here is the essential point. Clarity in observation is born the moment your emotional stake in the outcome dissolves. Picture walking into a room without the need for approval, validation, or performance. Just entering and seeing. And when they do, the room goes quiet. You'd perceive the unspoken alliances, frictions, and hierarchies. While some are busy talking to make an impression, you are seeing what they are all missing. This is the path to quiet influence, but by comprehending it so thoroughly that you can navigate it like water fluid, perceptive, and intentional. You become the individual who contributes less frequently. But when you do speak, your words have weight because they arise not from emotional noise, but from clarity. But this clarity is only possible when you cease your emotional reactions. So, what can you do to foster this discipline? Begin with quiet, and who is given space, see how body language changes based on proximity to others. This may seem unnatural initially, but with practice, it will become your greatest strength. you will begin to see what everyone else is blind to. Next, practice non-reaction. Someone directs a passive-aggressive remark. Your way, don't flinch. Don't return the energy. Simply absorb it, observe it, hold it in your mind, and examine it from all sides. What does this communicate about them? What message are they attempting to send? This is what the Stoics referred to as apatheianon. Apathy, but a mastery over emotional turmoil. It isn't that you cease to feel, it's that your feelings no longer dictate your actions in a world hooked on reaction. The composed observer is a rarity, and people take note. Even if it's unspoken, they sense it. They sense your presence, your grounded nature, your separation from the chaos. And within that quiet, you find your leverage, not through manipulation, but through deep understanding. You start to notice, for example, that people often glance at the person they are most drawn to when they laugh. Word is often the one holding the most fragile position, and you don't condemn them for it. You simply see it. You identify the patterns, and then you act, but only when it aligns with a greater purpose. The Stoic doesn't speak merely to be heard. The Stoic speaks when it is helpful, when it is required, and when it conveys a truth founded on observation, because words, once released, are like arrows. If your aim is blurred by emotion, you will consistently miss your mark. This is why detachment forms the bedrock of perception. It cleans the lens, it hones your sight. It allows you to outsmart others, not with deceit, but with discipline. And if you believe this approach to life will make you seem aloof or disconnected, reconsider. An authentic, clear, and centered presence has a magnetic quality. People are drawn to the individual who sees things as they are, knowing that person is not easily swayed by illusion or manipulation. It is sovereign so. I ask you, are you prepared to trade the comfort of emotional reaction for the power of strategic observation? Are you ready to evolve from the person who needs to be heard into the person who sees through all the noise? The moment you make that shift, the world will appear differently. Not more chaotic, but more ordered. Not more confusing, but quieter. You will see that the turmoil was never out there. It was inside your own mind. That is our next step. 2. Observe yourself as a stranger. The majority of us navigate our lives with the assumption of self-knowledge. We are convinced our feelings are valid, our words are coherent, and our decisions are sound. But belief is not the same as clarity. Being familiar with yourself isn't the same as truly understanding your own nature. And here is the difficult reality: the person you believe you are, and the person others. Experience may be two vastly different individuals. You might believe you're projecting confidence, while others perceive it as arrogance. You could think, your humor is charming, when in reality, people find it draining. You may assume you are respected when you are merely being put up with, and without stepping outside of your own perspective, you will remain unaware. The Stoics knew this long. Before the advent of modern psychology, we suffer more in imagination than in reality, Seneca remarked. But the opposite is also true. We often envision ourselves as more virtuous, intelligent, or compassionate than our actions demonstrate. This is why the most crucial journey is not external or upward, but inward. And to travel that road, you must learn to see yourself as if you were a stranger. Begin with a thought experiment. Imagine for 1 week, a documentary crew is silently recording your every move. Not to critique or reveal your secrets, but simply to observe. How would your behavior change if you knew every word, every look? Every reaction would be scrutinized by someone who has no preconceived notions about you, someone attempting to discover who you truly are. Would you still tell that passive-aggressive joke? Would you continue to interrupt people? Would you still force a laugh at an unfunny comment to feel included? The unease you feel at this thought, it is the birth of awareness. When you start to view yourself from this external perspective, a change occurs. You begin to recognize the ingrained patterns you've inhabited for years without a second thought. You notice that your confident tone is actually hurried, that your calm posture is in fact rigid, and that your laughter is often a social reflex rather than an expression of genuine amusement. You see that you have been acting a part more than you have been living authentically. I am not saying this to be critical. I say it because it is a trap we all fall into until we learn a different way. Self-observation, in the Stoic tradition, is not about self-criticism. It is clarity without condemnation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the impediment to action advances. Action. What stands in the way becomes the way. When you start to see your own imperfections clearly, do not retreat. Do not feel ashamed. That moment of discomfort does not signal the end of your confidence. It signals the start of your growth. Consider this story. A young woman named Anna was seen as the strong one in her circle. She was outspoken, full of energy, always ready with a solution, always taking charge. People depended on her, or at least that's what she believed. One afternoon, after a team meeting went poorly, she overheard two of her colleagues talking. One said, "Anna never really listens. She just waits for her turn to talk." The comment stung her. Her initial reaction was anger and defensiveness. But later that evening, she replayed the meeting in her mind over and over, and she finally saw it. She didn't truly listen. She interrupted others. She used certainty as a shield for her insecurity. That evening, she started to journal, not about the faults of others, but about her own actions, how she spoke and how she reacted. She began to study her own conduct, as if analyzing a character in a book, and gradually she transformed, not to gain approval, but to find inner peace, because she wanted to become someone she could genuinely respect, not someone she had to perpetually defend. This is the gift of self-observation. It doesn't bring you shame, it brings you alignment. Yet most people shy away from it. They remain barricaded inside their own minds, protecting their self-image like a fortress. They fail to ask, does my way of speaking help or hinder? Is the energy I carry into a room calming or agitating? Do people feel more at ease or more burdened after interacting with me? And so they remain blind, not because they are inherently bad, but because it never occurred to them to look at themselves from an outside perspective. But what if you did? What if you adopted the daily practice of stepping back to study yourself? Not with harshness, but with honesty. A skilled diplomat doesn't just enter a negotiation and start talking. They are acutely aware of their posture, the cadence of their voice, the impact of their timing. A single miscalculation can have huge consequences. Why should you treat your own life with any less attention? You may not be managing a corporation, but you are always an ambassador for something. Your principles, your presence, your character. People are observing you, whether you are aware of it or not. And the most influential people are never the loudest. They are the most self-aware. So, begin with minor observations. Notice your speech patterns under pressure. Is there an underlying need for validation? Observe your laughter in social settings. Is it genuine or a defense mechanism? Watch how you recount stories. Are you sharing an honest account or subtly embellishing to appear more impressive? Do not judge yourself. Simply notice. That act of noticing is invaluable. It is what the Stoics called prosociattention, or vigilance over oneself. Epictetus instructed his students not just in abstract philosophy, but in the everyday discipline of observation. Because without that awareness, all the wisdom in the world is useless. Is a challenge for you. Tomorrow, conduct yourself as if someone were studying you, not in a way that makes you paranoid, but as a deliberate experiment. Pretend your entire day is being filmed for a documentary about the real you. Every conversation, every look, every quiet moment is being captured. At the end of the day, reflect, what would a stranger conclude about you from that recording? Would they perceive confidence or insecurity, compassion or ego, authenticity or a performance? Initially, this exercise might feel uncomfortable. You will notice habits you've never acknowledged. You might cringe at your own need for approval, at how easily you compromise your principles to fit in. But persist, because with time, you will stop performing and start aligning. You will begin to craft a life so genuine that even a stranger observing you would feel a rare emotion: respect. And this is where the Stoic journey becomes truly life-changing. You cease trying to manage how you are seen by others. You begin to master how you see yourself. Then, in a strange twist, others start to perceive you in a new light. Not because you've altered your image, but because you've altered your core being. This is the essence of true confidence. It is not entering a room with the thought, I am superior to everyone here. It is entering with a full awareness of your virtues and your faults, and the knowledge that you are still whole. That kind of presence requires no amplification. It does not beg for validation. It speaks for itself quietly, consistently, and powerfully. And with that, you start to live from a more profound place. A place where you are no longer guessing who you are, because you have observed, you have studied, and you have made adjustments. A place from which you can review your day and say, that was me, and I can stand by that. So, the next time you are tempted to justify your actions or ignore feedback, just pause. Step outside of yourself. Observe. Ask, is this the kind of person I would admire? If the answer is no, change something no matter how small. Because while 0% improvement is still zero, a tiny 0.1% improvement each day creates exponential growth over a year. And in the Stoic philosophy, that is what matters. Not perfection, but progress. Not performance, but alignment. Once you have learned to see yourself clearly, stripped of both flattery and fear, you will discover something profound. How you are perceived by others ceases to be a puzzle because you understand that your own bearing is what molds their view of you. And that brings us to the next step. What if, by simply adjusting how you speak and hold yourself, you could command attention without ever demanding it? That is precisely what we will delve into next. 3. Master the pause, master yourself. A lack of sound tends to make people uneasy. This is why so many conversations are filled with verbal static, forced laughter, and rambling explanations that go nowhere. People are fundamentally afraid of silence. The moment a pause lasts a second too long, almost anyone will rush to fill the void. But here is a principle the Stoics grasped long ago that the modern world has forgotten. Silence is not a sign of fragility. It's a tool of influence. We have been conditioned to see silence as a breakdown in communication, to believe that if no one is speaking, something has gone awry. Not because it allows you to dominate others, but because it prompts them to reveal themselves. When you cease speaking, others begin to show you who they are. And if you can remain calm, quiet, and still, you will perceive it all. In Stoic practice, silence is not a passive state. It is an active exercise of presence. Epictetus taught we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But how frequently do you actually listen? Not just to the words themselves, but to the meaning that lies between them. A strategically placed pause offers others the space to show their true selves. A veteran salesperson was in a high-stakes negotiation with a new client. The quiet stretched on. The client appeared anxious, adjusted his posture, and after only a few moments, began talking himself into the deal, offering up information and agreeing to terms he might have otherwise contested. The agreement was finalized shortly after, but the young observer never forgot what secured that deal. It was silence, deliberate, assured, and patient silence. This same principle is applicable in everyday interactions. Most people talk not to build connection, but to persuade. They meander, over-justify, and attempt to sound intelligent or assert control. You are not desperate to be heard. You are considering whether your next words are even necessary. Try this in your next discussion after the other person finishes speaking. Let that quiet moment settle. People often rush to elaborate, to defend their position, to explain their reasoning, simply because your silence gives them the space to do so. And what it does for you is even more significant. In those few seconds, you pull yourself out of the trap of emotional reaction. The words, you start to hear the motive. And once you grasp the motive, you understand the entire dynamic. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." This applies to conversation as well. When someone attempts to destabilize you with arrogance, manipulation, or passive aggression, the common response is to mirror their energy, to talk faster, louder, or more sharply. But the Stoic pauses, not as a retreat, but as an active choice. A choice to determine if a response is warranted, if it aligns with one's principles, if it promotes peace, or just feeds the ego. And frequently, in that moment of quiet, the compulsion to respond simply dissolves. But silence is not only for defense. The form of the statue is created not just by the stone that is chipped away, but also by the space that remains. The same holds true for language. The pauses between your words give them their shape, but those who master the pause make each word significant. Let's make this tangible. Ask yourself, do you over-explain things even when no one has asked for more detail? Do you use laughter to mask discomfort even when something isn't amusing? Do you speak too rapidly, as if any silence would betray your anxiety? If you answered yes, you are not unusual. But you are also surrendering your power. Every superfluous word is a debit from your emotional reserve. Every hasty reply is a squandered chance to command the space you are in. So, start taking back that space. A manager named David was dealing with an upset employee. He had a habit of speaking, quickly, keen to solve problems and prove his competence. But a mentor had advised him, slow your pace. Let silence do some of the heavy lifting. So, during his next challenging conversation, after the employee had finished a lengthy complaint, David simply said nothing. He remained quiet, not dismissively, not fearfully, just calmly. The employee, caught off guard, started speaking again, but this time with a softer, more honest tone. In the end, the employee thanked him not only for the resolution, but also for the way he had listened. It fosters an environment where trust can grow. But be aware, this requires discipline. It demands restraint. Initially, you will feel a strong desire to interrupt, to clarify, to fill the space. That is your insecurity acting up. You will find that people are not only unnerved by silence, they also respect those who are comfortable with it. And there is something more profound at work here. You no longer feel the need to chase validation with your voice. You no longer dread uncomfortable moments. And that is when your presence becomes magnetic. Not because you are loud, but because you have substance. In a society that often mistakes loudness for importance, they are perceived as someone who speaks not out of a need for attention, but out of choice, and that is a rare quality. That is why people listen more intently when you speak, because they sense you don't need to speak, but grounded, strategic, and present. You learn to speak only when your words are more valuable than your silence, and frequently they are not. Sometimes, but a well-timed pause, one that communicates confidence, awareness, and self-control, will have a much more lasting impact. So, begin to practice this in your next conversation. Pause before you answer. See how others react to the quiet. Hear what they disclose when they assume you are just collecting your thoughts. Let your stillness be a point of contrast. Let it speak for you. And as you do this more and more, you will notice a peculiar shift. Not because you demanded it, but because your silence created the space for it. And now that you have learned to see others with clarity, it is time to go to a deeper level. It is time to learn how to perceive the entire system, not just the individuals, but the patterns, not just the actions, but the forces that drive them, and become unshakable. 4. See the pattern move with wisdom. There is a dynamic at play in your life at this very moment that you're only partially aware of, not because it is concealed, but because you have not yet conditioned your mind to perceive it. The world is not a series of arbitrary events. It operates in repeating cycles. People behave in patterns. They viewed the progression of events not as random luck, but as a chain of consequences, as a rhythm of cause and effect. And they conditioned their minds to recognize these rhythms, to move in harmony with them, not in opposition to them. Because when you learn to identify patterns, you can start to foresee outcomes. The office grabs a snack at the same time and complains about the same issue. Most people would see this every day and dismiss it. But a person who is truly paying attention would recognize it for what it is, a pattern, not just a routine, but a behavioral feedback loop. And within every loop, there is an opportunity. If you can understand another person's rhythm, you can understand how to interact with it, effectively not to manipulate, but to influence. There is a crucial distinction. Imagine one day you approach this person and have a document they need ready on their desk just before they walk by. You have stepped into their pattern without causing a disruption. This isn't a matter of luck. In Stoic philosophy, this is what Epictetus meant when he said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." It is about harmonizing with the natural flow of things, not trying to force them, but understanding them. Because the reality is, most people are driven by unconscious cycles. Their words, their reactions, and their choices are seldom as spontaneous as they imagine. But you can only perceive this if you are still enough, calm enough, and disciplined, enough to observe without passing judgment. Let me offer a more consequential example. Imagine you are dealing with a team leader who publicly criticizes small mistakes but privately admits they hate looking unprepared. The pattern is a fear of appearing incompetent. So, in a meeting, instead of arguing a point directly, you frame your suggestion as a way to ensure the team is fully prepared for any questions from senior management. You are speaking to their underlying pattern of fear, not their surface-level arrogance. And just like that, they are on your side. That is not a trick, that is mastery. And it all begins with observation. But here is a caution the Stoics would strongly emphasize: this kind of perception is a powerful tool. If wielded without virtue, it descends into manipulation, a method to exploit rather than to enlighten. Insights to control people for your own selfish advantage. So, if you are going to see patterns, truly see them. Your own life is a collection of patterns. Your routines, your thoughts, your anxieties. They are not accidental. The spike of anxiety you feel before a presentation is a pattern. Way you shut down during conflict is a pattern. But if you do not step back and observe, you will continue to label these as moods or phases, when they are actually routines playing out on a loop. Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing, and drags along the reluctant. Patterns are like currents in a river." The real question is, will you navigate them with intention, or will you be swept away by them unconsciously? Note the kinds of settings that stimulate your mind. Then, take it a step further, begin to study others, not with the intent to judge, but to comprehend. In meetings, see who speaks up first and who holds back. In conversations, notice who is fishing for compliments and who speaks with an air of detachment. Patterns are everywhere. The person who deflects whenever asked about their feelings, the acquaintance who only contacts you when they want something, the colleague who consistently assigns blame when projects fail. Once you train your mind to see past the surface-level words, you will never look at the world in the same way again. But this level of awareness requires one final skill: patience. A mind that craves immediate results cannot perceive patterns, because patterns often take time to become clear. They emerge through repeated observation. A Stoic mind fights the impulse to make hasty judgments. It remains in the present, gathers data, and waits. Because while everyone else is busy reacting to the latest event, you are tracking the recurring cycle. About a person in your life whose behavior you find confusing. Perhaps they are erratic, challenging, or difficult to understand. For the next 2 weeks, do not try to analyze or confront them. Just observe, make mental notes. How do they handle disagreement? Does their demeanor change based on who is present? Are there subjects they actively avoid? What kind of praise do they respond to most strongly? You are not spying. You are being a student of human nature. You are looking for patterns, not isolated incidents. At the end of this period, you will have something that most people never acquire: an emotional blueprint of another human being. Now, think about applying this, not just to one individual, but to everyone you interact with. You will start to move through your life with a quiet assurance, because while others are scrambling to win the next interaction, you are seeing 10 moves down the line. You are no longer reacting to what they just did. You are anticipating what they always do. This is not about being more intelligent. It is about being more present, more deliberate, and more in sync with the true workings of reality. But with profound insight comes profound responsibility. Use this ability with wisdom, not to manipulate events, but to find harmony with them, not to control people, but to meet them where they are. In the world of sales, there is a common saying: enter the conversation that is already taking place. In the customer's mind, the Stoics would expand on that. They would advise, enter the life that is already unfolding beneath the surface. Step into the rhythm, but do so with virtue. Because if you fail to do so, if you use this perception to mislead, it will corrupt you from the inside, the kind of individuals that others cannot help but respect. So remember, people are patterns and life is rhythm. And once you can read it, you can base your choices not on speculation, but on wisdom. And when you learn to see that far ahead, when you live with that depth of awareness, you no longer live in fear of the unknown. You have become the kind of person who does not need to predict the future to move with power. Here is how you become untouchable. Not by overpowering others, but by mastering yourself. When you can perceive with clarity instead of reacting, see patterns without judgment, use words with purpose, and act from a place of wisdom, you elevate. yourself above the chaos. While everyone else is clamoring for attention, you become the one they observe in quiet admiration. That is genuine influence. That is authentic strength. If these ideas connect with you and you are prepared to continue forging a mind that perceives more and requires less, think about subscribing. If you are committing to clarity instead of chaos, I would be glad to see who is on this path alongside me. And always remember, true development doesn't occur in the midst of noise. It unfolds in the quiet moments, in heightened awareness, and in the small, consistent choices that only you are privy to. Stay centered, stay perceptive. The next video will guide you on how to navigate any environment with quiet authority. I'll see you in the next one.